Listen, okay, I'm not trying to dunk on you guys too hard or anything, but in all intensive purposes, the most obtusely proportionate being on the face of this rock is preposterously the giraffe. I mean, we have these iridescently long necks, we have the conniving wit of a boisterously geriatric fox, and the quintessential dichotomy of a morbidly obese bodybuilder. I mean, come on, look at me, we're just built different. The perfect design of any creature. For clarity, this is a joke, by the way. I promise I'm not that stupid, just let me cook. You know who isn't built different though? Coach Whittenberg from Hey Arnold. Without a doubt, this guy has to be the biggest dirtbag in the entire show. And I imagine right now you're probably thinking of Oscar Kokoschka or maybe Helga's parents, but I promise by the end of this video you'll see just how much of a disproportionate, chicken-legged, overinflated Neanderthal that this guy is. The circumstances of him being a piece of garbage are way more damaging than anything that literally anybody else in this show has done. Plus, I mean, the guy is an absolute moron. Repetitively. However, as with nearly every episode of Hey Arnold, there's a deeper meaning to every single story presented. As much as this guy sucks, every single story that he's been a part of in this show has come loaded with an important moral. One that usually ends up going right over his head. That's why today on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're going to check out some episodes of Hey Arnold that showcase how much Coach Whittenberg is just truly the scum that someone scraped out of the bottom of the barrel and shaped into a human. But first, if you're not subscribed, do that right now, and Giraffe Sean will tray flip El Toro 3 times. Take that, Chris Jocelyn. Giraffe Sean for Skater of the Year 2026, baby. Now, here's the thing. It's not all too often that I go scorched earth. Usually I'm pretty go with the flow, and it takes a lot to really piss me off. However, Coach Whittenberg is one of those characters that just grinds my gears more than anyone else in Hey Arnold, and he always has from the start. Even when I was a kid, anytime this guy was in an episode, he just drove me insane. Legitimately, from the first moment that they introduced us to his character, it was strongly enforced that this guy is supposed to be a huge dipwad. He thinks he knows everything, he thinks he's good at everything, and he acts like he's owed everything when in all reality he's just the most hyperbolized representation of an average guy who feels slighted over the fact that he didn't get the special treatment from the entire world around him. He's the kind of guy that expects the world handed to him on a silver platter, but he gets mad when that doesn't happen, so he just trains arms, skips leg day, and pretends like he's good at sports when, ironically, we've never actually seen him play any sports. He's the definition of the age-old saying, those that can't do, teach. And those that can't teach, coach gym class. He's not even good enough at coaching to keep a consistent team. He pushes everyone that gets close to him away, and he's overall just an arrogant jerk. And I think that's kind of why this isn't a traditional dark side of Hey Arnold video, because he doesn't really deserve that kind of deep dive. He's not that solid or complex of a character to deeply analyze, and despite him being in quite a few episodes, we never got any deep explanation as to why he is the way that he is. He's just kind of a hollow vessel. With that in mind, it's really frustrating to admit that some of the most important life lessons in this show are told through his hollow vessel of a character. Lessons about choosing to be miserable, prioritizing the wrong things in life, and repressing your emotions, among many other very sensitive aspects of life. He's not the kind of character who's a beacon for change or hope. As a matter of fact, he's the perfect representation of what happens when one is completely opposed to change and expects everyone else around them to change, even though they themselves are the problem. It's crazy to realize that as a kid, much like many other episodes, the deeper meaning behind his character and his stories went completely over my head. It's pretty easy to take his story about being a failed coach with a failing marriage at face value and not really think about the why of it all. But between putting his son on a pedestal above all other kids and organizing a synchronized swimming team to deal with deep-rooted family trauma, a pretty vivid picture is painted within every episode that he's in. Just usually underneath the layers of idiocy and repetitive big-headed failures. Coach Whittenberg's story is one that started pretty early on in season 1. At this point, we were only 5 episodes deep into the series, and we hadn't really seen many antagonistic characters other than really just Helga and Harold. In nearly every episode so far up to this point, Arnold would mainly have been a victim of circumstance. However, this episode would be one of the first episodes where the core conflict is directly instigated by someone who just grinds your gears as a viewer. Before Arnold was mugged, before Stoop Kid threatened everybody, and long before Wolfgang, the 5th grade bully, was introduced to the show, we would see Coach Whittenberg start his path of reckless buffoonery in the episode Benchwarmer. So this episode starts out with Arnold and Gerald playing basketball at their local community center, the YMAA, which of course is a play on the YMCA. The two are hyped to be part of an actual legitimate league where they're both guaranteed to get some time in the game. Suddenly, their conversation is cut short by the ear-piercing sound of Coach Whittenberg's whistle calling for all of the players to line up on the bench. He introduces himself and wastes no time getting to know these kids or learning their names or anything like that. Instead, getting right to talking about the overall strategy that he plans to base their team around.
Being as I am the coach of this said team, it's recumbent that you do whatever I dictate. So heretofore...
Now, right out the gate, I'm going to stop us right here and point out the first thing about Coach Whittenberg that drives me absolutely nuts. And it's something that I completely missed as a kid. That is, until it became more and more glaringly obvious as the seasons of the show went on. Once we reached season 4, it's literally impossible to miss, but early on it's one of those gags that, especially if you're a kid, or if you just don't pay close attention to the guy, you might not notice it. Coach Whittenberg has this tendency to use words that don't really belong in a sentence just to make himself seem smarter. Most of the times, just using words completely wrong. Like him saying that it's recumbent that they do whatever he dictates. First of all, the word recumbent specifically refers to lying down. And there's like no way, shape, or form that the word recumbent belongs in this sentence whatsoever. Other than that, the term dictate comes with a specific kind of energy that I'm not sure this guy is entirely aware of. It seems like to him, he's just using the term dictate to essentially describe the things he tells them. Which, I mean, that's definitely the proper way to use the word if you're talking about the context of maybe like dictating a letter for someone to transcribe or something along those lines. However, the word dictate also means to authoritatively impose your will on others, typically like giving orders in a bossy or demanding manner. In all reality, it's kind of hilarious because he does end up playing a rather dictator-esque role in this one, but nevertheless, you know good and well that him using the term dictate is definitely not intended to be associated with that kind of mindset on his part. He's just a little too arrogant to look up the words and phrases that he uses before he confidently uses them, hence why he uses the term theretofore as if it were a proper conjunctive adverbial phrase. Also, just for clarity, this is the basis of that beginning gag from the start of the video where I misused a bunch of random convoluted words. Again, I may be a silly cartoon giraffe on the internet, but I promise I'm not Coach Whittenberg level brain dead. I'll spare you guys the headache for now because there will be plenty of misused words to come between this guy and his equally boneheaded wife, and I'll sum up these ramblings into simple words. The entire strategy of their team is to always give the ball to the coach's son, Tucker, as quickly as possible. Now, it needs to be noted that Tucker is seemingly just an average kid. He's not like some basketball prodigy or anything like that. I mean, he isn't terrible, but from the looks of it, he's about as good as the rest of the 9-year-olds on the court. With that in mind, it's evident that the coach demanding that every play revolve around getting the ball to Tucker is about something deeper than just some winning strategy. I mean, I could totally get that angle if Tucker was LeBron James in the flesh, sure. From a point of view that solely cares about winning, getting the ball to the best player on this average team makes sense. However, Tucker isn't some crazy skilled prodigy, and this is literally a league for kids where the whole point is for everyone to get involved, not to win. It's not meant to be some dictatorship run by a coach who picks and chooses who gets to play just because he wants to be the best coach of a children's basketball team. Of course, we'll get to the many possible deep-rooted issues that could potentially lead to Coach Whittenberg making this kind of decision, but for now, I want to point out possibly the biggest reason why this man is worse than nearly any other character in this show. Like I said earlier, people like Oscar Kokoschka are probably the first to come to mind when thinking of the biggest scumbag in Hey Arnold. But we need to keep in mind that Oscar is just some guy at the boarding house mooching off of everyone, including his own poor wife. He's not in charge of legitimately anything, thank God. He doesn't have an entire team of kids looking up to him for guidance. He isn't in charge of these kids for a set time each week, utilizing that time to boss a bunch of children around while he puts his own kid on a pedestal. Principal Warts is another scumbag that comes to mind. However, though he may be the principal, inherently that role comes with a bit more of an administration and heavily disciplinarian-leaning role. He doesn't interact directly with all of these kids and play as influential of a role in their daily lives as, say, their teacher or their basketball coach. One of the biggest things that sets Coach Whittenberg apart as a massive piece of garbage, before even really getting into the spiciest parts of it all, purely is the context of which he exists as a piece of garbage. When Oscar does some slimy stuff, it only really affects the person he's doing it to at minimum and the entire boarding house at maximum. Meanwhile, Coach Whittenberg's actions affect an entire slew of like 15 plus kids, which of course those kids' experience and troubles all bleed into and affect their home lives. Which, if their parents are worth their weight, they will definitely notice. Coach Whittenberg's scummy actions have a lot more of a rippling effect and the potential to damage many more people that are particularly vulnerable than literally anybody else in this show. I mean, like, we even see basketball practice underway, and it's straight up just all of these kids standing around for hours while one by one they take turns passing the ball to Tucker. It's not even about learning to pass, because if that were the case, they could just practice passing back and forth in pairs instead of just standing around waiting for their turn to pass the ball to Tucker. Like, can you just imagine how damaging that is as a kid who is just trying to have some fun and be included in this game? Just having to stand around and watch as the coach's son is pretty much the only one who gets any legitimate practice? Like, not only are you being robbed of the experience of just having fun, but you're being made to feel so little and unimportant that you're not even allowed to touch the ball, unless you're passing it to Tucker. I mean, Coach Whittenberg is pretty much trying to burn it into these kids' brain that if you're passing the ball, you're only passing the ball to Tucker. Period. It doesn't even matter if you're passing the ball to somebody else just so they can pass it to Tucker from a better angle. No, that's not okay. You are expected to give the ball to Tucker immediately, no matter what, even when he isn't open. As a matter of fact, we actually see that exact scenario play out firsthand. We cut to the first game of the season where over and over again the whole team just keeps giving the ball to Tucker, allowing him to be the only kid that scores any points for their team. At one point though, Arnold has the ball, and when he looks to Tucker, he's got two players on defense right in front of him, not even really attempting to move away or play some offense in any sense. He's just kind of standing around. At that, Arnold makes the decision to pass the ball to Gerald instead, and as you'd expect, it just hits the fan. Coach Whittenberg calls an immediate timeout to rip Arnold a new one.
Arnold, you fragrantly didn't listen to me.
Now, I don't want to be too petty. I know you guys are well aware of vocabulary, and you aren't stupid like Coach Whittenberg. With that being said, I'm not going to sit here and pick apart every single thing that this guy says and explain what he really means, because I don't want to insult your guys' intelligence, because I'm sure you're probably picking it apart on your own. But man, I just cannot let this one slide. This guy is such an overconfident dumbass. First of all, he just told Arnold that he flagrantly didn't listen to him. Flagrantly. It's interesting because you can tell that Coach Whittenberg at least understands the context of what he's trying to say. He's just too dumb to know the proper word for that spot in the sentence. He's kind of like Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. He knows that he's trying to get the sentiment across that it's not rocket science, but he's such an idiot that what comes out of his mouth instead is it's not rocket appliances. In this case, what Coach Whittenberg meant to say was flagrantly, which kind of describes something occurring in a very notorious and obviously offensive way. Not fragrantly, which describes something with a very strong, pleasing aroma. Even then though, you flagrantly didn't listen to me just sounds so awkward. Even if he got the word correct, the way he uses it just doesn't flow well to make him sound intelligent like he's clearly trying to do. So from there, Arnold tries to explain that Tucker wasn't open for the pass, but Coach just yells at him, saying that he's unrespecting the game plan. Which, God, that's not even a word. And he follows that up by telling Arnold that he's out of the game so he can have some time to think about his insubordinates. And I mean, God, this guy just has me face palming so hard. In a way, he's actually so close with this one. The word insubordinate describes being defiant of authority or blatantly disobedient, which in a way, I guess that term could kind of work for this context if Arnold was doing this to blatantly disrespect the coach and defy his authority. But Arnold simply was just using his critical thinking to recognize that passing the ball to Tucker didn't really make much sense at that moment. And on top of that, the word he was looking for was insubordination. Some people throw around the term insubordinance, which also isn't a proper word, but even then, he couldn't get that right, as there's clearly a difference between insubordinates and insubordinates. Regardless, it's clear that Coach Whittenberg is wrong in both his coaching strategy as well as his use of vocabulary. On top of that, though, can we just look at his character model for a second? This guy is built like an overgrown sunflower whose stalk never got thick enough to hold its upper weight. Dude looks like if you took Mr. Krabs' torso and attached Double D's legs and Wreck-It Ralph's arms. Everything about his character just makes no sense from his brain all the way down to his proportions. He's like if Tammy Slaton's forehead circa 2021 had a baby with Kip from Napoleon Dynamite. So Arnold naturally feels defeated, and as time goes on, he ends up learning something about Tucker as he watches from the bench. This kid is about as good as Shaq when it comes to making free throws. He stands there at the line, sweating bullets and panicking as everybody watches him, all the while his dad screams at him in the background. And every single time, without fail, he completely misses the basket.
Crying out loud, you can't miss those big free throws, Tucker! Suck it up, son!
With Tucker having lost the game for his entire team, Arnold and Gerald watch from afar as Tucker gets berated and torn to pieces verbally by his father, noting that it almost makes them feel bad for him. Now, this right here, if anything, shows just how much pressure that Coach Whittenberg puts directly on his son's shoulders. He legitimately expects him to single-handedly win this game without relying on help of the entire team who's supposed to be working together. But why is that? Why does Coach Whittenberg put such an emphasis on only Tucker getting to touch the ball and score points? For me, the first thing that came to mind was maybe if Tucker was previously excluded by other kids when trying to play basketball with them. This could be Coach's way of ensuring that never happens again. If he's the coach, he can make sure that Tucker never gets left out. The thing is, though, there's a high likelihood that isn't the case. If it was, he wouldn't be so hard-pressed on winning, and instead he'd probably just be happy that his boy was the only one who got the spotlight the entire time. On top of that, though, if it was something that he was conscious about with his own child, that would indicate he probably has an awareness for the same thing as it pertains to other children, but that absolutely is not the case. Plus, there would likely be a clear and obvious reason that we would perceive for Tucker to have previously been excluded by the other kids if this was the case. Sure, sometimes kids can be blindly rude and exclude someone for no reason. However, usually in this kind of context, it happens because either A, that kid isn't very good at basketball and the other players want to exclude them to help better their odds of winning, or B, that kid was a jerk and did something at some point to make the other players not like them, which in turn makes them not want to pass the ball their way. We don't really see any of that with Tucker, other than, of course, his complete inability to make a free throw. So it's pretty safe to say that Tucker being previously excluded probably isn't the root of his issue here. The only other thing that came to mind is something that Coach Whittenberg brought up very briefly at the start of the episode. He said that Tucker would have gotten MVP last year if it wasn't for the voting aspect. First off, I can't help but wonder if Coach Whittenberg was in charge of Tucker's team last year as well, or if this is his first year coaching. That's actually kind of a big deciding factor in this point, because if this is his first year, which by the looks of it, it seems to be, then there's a high likelihood he pursued this position out of power to guarantee Tucker's position as MVP. If Tucker is the only one to touch the ball, no one else can be MVP. Furthermore, with the coach being in a position of power, that kind of leaves everyone feeling obligated to vote for his son, fearing what the punishment would look like if they don't. Or, of course, with his position of power, he could simply just rig the vote. But with all that in mind, I mean, Arnold got put on the bench and punished literally just for not passing the ball to Tucker when he wasn't open. If that pissed off Coach Whittenberg that much, imagine how pissed off he would be to find out that Arnold didn't vote for Tucker for MVP at the end of the season. He'd probably bench him indefinitely, if not unjustly kick him off the team. One big part of all this that needs to be considered, though, is that we've seen literally zero indication that Tucker cares about any of this. He doesn't seem like he's got really any personality, let alone one that revolves around desperately needing to be a team MVP. For what it's worth, he seems like a normal kid who just kind of wants to play the game and have fun. With that being said, we're kind of led to the most likely of all the reasons for Coach Whittenberg being so insistent that everyone only passes the ball to Tucker. The fact that he's more or less living vicariously through his son to make up for memories that he himself never had. Again, we haven't really seen any indication of Tucker being previously excluded or any reason why they would have wanted to exclude him to begin with, other than his dad being a massive jerk. With Coach Whittenberg being how he is, though, it wouldn't be all too surprising if he was the one who got excluded as a kid, and as a result, he's very persistent in making sure that his own son is not only included, but the entire team needing to revolve around his existence. If I had to guess, as a kid, Coach Whittenberg was probably a jerk, and a lot of people probably didn't like him because of it. Either that or he was just really bad at basketball. Hence why he's a lackluster children's coach and not a player himself, or maybe the coach of an actual serious team. I'd be willing to bet that Coach Whittenberg is the one that always dreamed of being the MVP and the star of the show himself, but he never really got that because, for one reason or another, nobody ever really wanted to pass him the ball. Of course, with him being a man who grew up in the generation that was always just told to suck it up no matter the situation, even if it was him actually being bullied, if this were to be the case, his parents and the coach likely wouldn't do anything to help him. There's a good chance that he knows what it's like to be a kid who was excluded from the team and to not have a responsible adult there to advocate for him, and as a result, he overcompensates when it comes to his own son, essentially becoming the bully himself to a bunch of other kids along the way. And little does he know, his actions are full-blown just making these kids hate his son a lot more than they probably would have otherwise. Now, from there, we fast forward to after the game, where Arnold hangs around to shoot some baskets for a while, and we see him just sinking free throw after free throw like magic. Eventually, he's approached by none other than Tucker, who is just dumbfounded.
Man, I can never do that.
Come on, son, don't let me down. Take a shot! Take a shot! Take a shot!
Every time I try, I think of my dad and I choke.
Now, this moment is an important one to take in because this confirms for us that the way his father is, naturally, is having a pretty negative effect on Tucker's mental health. He's not able to clear his head and focus on free throws because he's drowning under the massive weight of his father's pressure that he puts on him. It honestly doesn't come as much of a surprise that Tucker is affected by all this, given that he's just a little kid who has his dad's entire livelihood, confidence, and all resting on his shoulders. But nevertheless, it's definitely something that I at least wanted to make sure that we acknowledge. It's not easy having an overconfident failure of a father, I imagine. At that, Tucker begs Arnold to teach him how to make his free throws just like he does, and of course, Arnold, being the kind soul that he is, agrees to help. They meet up the next day, and we get this whole Zen montage with some ambient new age music while Arnold stresses to Tucker the importance of knowing the ball, from how many dots are on it down to just having time to meditate and resonate with the energy of the ball itself. He teaches Tucker about trusting the ball, making him put on a blindfold and repeatedly toss the ball, getting the feel for the physics of sinking the shot perfectly. By the end of it all, Tucker ends up mastering his free throws, all thanks to Arnold's help. Just like that, we cut to the next game where yet again his father's expectations are just sky high. But when Tucker gets fouled and sinks perfect free throw after perfect free throw, his dad is just left mind blown. He asks him where this newfound skill came from, and of course, Tucker just chalks it up to good old-fashioned hard work and practice.
Yeah, all on my own.
That's my boy, Tucker.
Oh man, if looks could kill at this moment, the daggers Arnold is staring into Tucker would be the end of him. This is the moment where the band-aid is forcefully ripped off, where we get a glimpse at the fact that Tucker genuinely is just as spineless of a jerk as his father. He either doesn't have the guts to tell his dad that he had help from Arnold, or he's just so desperate to get recognition from his father that he seized this opportunity to have his ego inflated and pretend that nobody else had anything to do with his miraculous new skill. Either way, there is no way at all of explaining how this was okay. Even if it wasn't Tucker's intention to deny Arnold of any credit, he still did, and that's wrong of him to do. Whether he meant to or knows better already or not is irrelevant. And it doesn't make what happened any less wrong, especially given the context. Arnold hasn't even been allowed to play at all for multiple games now because the coach got mad at him a while ago for not passing the ball to his son when he wasn't even open to receive the pass. Arnold still helps this kid, and when presented with the opportunity to give Arnold some credit and maybe put him in his dad's good graces, potentially getting him off the bench, Tucker just throws Arnold right under the bus, pretending he isn't even there. He doesn't even apologize to Arnold for it either. He just sits there awkwardly until his dad calls him into the game seconds later, leaving Arnold just alone on the bench to watch this kid who he could hoop circles around in his sleep play this game single-handedly, getting that special treatment just because his below-average father is the coach of the team. It's kind of funny too because I don't even play team sports or even like them in general. I'd rather watch like Street League skateboarding than the NBA any day of the week. I'd rather tread the bowl at my local skate park than toss a ball around in a field. I'm not even invested in the basketball aspect of this episode whatsoever. I'm just appalled at how much of a piece of trash that Coach Whittenberg is and how much the apple genuinely didn't fall far from the tree. We haven't even seen this kid's mother yet either. She's a whole different form of sweetheart in and of herself. From there, though, this episode just takes the most amazing karmic turn that the universe could have ever thrown into the situation. And when I say the universe, I mean the handful of people working in the writer's room for Hey Arnold. As Arnold sits on the bench watching the game, Tucker ends up getting fouled again and stepping up to the free throw line. However, this time, instead of his father's words echoing in his mind, he hears Arnold telling him to trust the ball, as well as himself saying that he did all of this on his own. Of course, feeling the immense pressure of his lie building up inside, he just fumbles the hell out of his free throws, completely missing the net by a long shot. In response, his dad starts yelling at him, and the admittedly small audience bursts into laughter at how terribly that he missed the shot. Now, really quick, I just have to bring up the fact that it says a lot about Tucker, how he fumbles when all eyes are on him, crumbling under pressure, and on top of that, his mind is echoing with worries and judgments from others, as well as his own actions. He struggles with expectations from others, guilt from his own wrongdoings, and likely his own self-image due to how brutally his dad belittles him for missing shots. As difficult as all of that is, it comes with the implication that Tucker carries a certain level of self-awareness that his father clearly lacks. Tucker is aware when he's struggling. He's aware when he's done something wrong. Meanwhile, his dad is the kind of guy who would, without a doubt, rather sweep those kinds of conversations under the rug and just never think about those thoughts, pretending instead that his mind is perfectly fine rather than face those thoughts head on. It genuinely makes you wonder about the kind of suppressed emotional weight that Coach Whittenberg is silently carrying, either consciously or subconsciously, and if maybe it plays a role in how he acts on a daily basis. So eventually we near the end of the game with 9 seconds left on the clock and their team down 2 points as they break for one final timeout.
We're down, but we're not up. The only thing we have to calculate is sink one shot.
Jesus Christ, just when I thought this guy couldn't get any more idiotic, he breaks out the old "we're down, but we're not up." Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. And honestly, when it comes to his use of the non-word faculate, I have no idea what he's going for with that one. I am just dumbfounded about how he pulled this one right out of thin air and seemingly made up a new word that actually sounds like it could potentially mean something. Regardless, his plan is to get them to a tie so that they can try to clutch the win in overtime. Of course, his entire plan hinges on Tucker being in the right place at the right time and sinking the shot, putting the entire weight of the game on his shoulders alone. You can tell by the look on Tucker's face, though, that he's extremely uncertain in his ability to pull this plan off. Honestly, I can't help but wonder how Tucker feels about all of this, really. I mean, he's never once voiced any opposition to this entire team revolving around him scoring every single point. It kind of circles back to the whole self-awareness aspect. I mean, he has to realize just how much of a jerk that it makes him look like to go along with this, right? There's absolutely no way he doesn't realize that this makes pretty much every kid on the team dislike him by default. Maybe he just doesn't care? Or maybe he really doesn't realize just how lame it is for an entire team to be centered around him. By all means, I guess there's a chance that he lacks situational awareness and the ability to read people's emotions, but does have awareness as far as his own emotions go. I guess he could just be that self-centered. And I mean, given that he's Coach Whittenberg's son, that could be the case if the apple truly fell right below the tree. But anyway, as the last 7 seconds play out, Tucker gets fouled and ends up on the free throw line yet again. But as he stands there, noticing Arnold on the bench, he fakes a shoulder injury, claiming that he must have been hurt when he got fouled. At that, the ref calls for Coach Whittenberg to put in a replacement shooter, which leads to him pretty much demanding Tucker power through it. Tucker, though, decides to come clean, telling his dad that he needs to put Arnold in, saying that he was the one who taught him how to shoot.
He can do it, Dad. And so can this team. Give them a chance. For once.
Now, I've got to be a little honest about this show. As much as I love it, there are just so many times where it drives me insane for the fact that resolutions like this come about without anybody taking accountability and apologizing for what they did. Tucker hasn't even for a second shown any care about the rest of this team, let alone Arnold. He straight up lied to his dad right in front of Arnold, refusing Arnold credit for being the one to teach him how to shoot free throws, and now he doesn't even have to acknowledge that he did that or even apologize for it because he faked an injury and told his dad the truth. I mean, I get that it's the principle of the gesture that symbolizes an apology, and in a way he did take accountability as far as his dad is concerned, but as someone who's a stickler for accountability, it's frustrating to see someone be so blatantly scummy and never really recognize that they made the decision to deliberately wrong someone and apologize directly to that person for their actions, whether those actions happened in the heat of the moment or not. From there, Coach Whittenberg reluctantly calls Arnold off the bench and puts him in Tucker's place, telling him not to mess this up. As Tucker and his dad warm the bench, Arnold sinks one of the shots with ease and ends up calling a timeout, pulling the rest of the team aside. He decides that he's gonna miss this free throw on purpose so they can run a strategy that they practiced as a team at the park, going for the win with a 2-pointer instead of a single free throw to tie it into overtime. And of course, like the well-oiled machine that this team is when they work together, they pull off Arnold's plan without a hitch, coming through with a 1-point lead right at the last second. Having pulled the team to victory, of course, everybody celebrates Arnold, even Coach Whittenberg, who tells him that he bestowed upon him a volatile lesson in teamwork.
From now on, the suppository of the team strategy will proceed as thusly.
Okay, hold on. I let volatile and bestowed slip, but we can't overlook this man literally using the word suppository when talking to this team about their approach to playing basketball. I'm not gonna define what that means, you can Google it if you really want to know, but let's just say that instead of pulling random words out of his ass, he's apparently putting them up inside there instead. I just cannot with this guy. He is something else, dude. The thing is, this episode is just scratching the surface, too. You haven't even seen the worst parts of his character yet. This is literal child's play compared to how far this man ends up going and how he manipulates these kids that he's supposed to be fostering a positive team environment for. At that, this episode comes to an end with Coach Whittenberg making the announcement that from now on, their team will operate as a normal team, with everyone getting time to play and touch the ball instead of just passing it right to Tucker. And of course, all of these kids are relieved and happy to hear that they'll actually get to play basketball in this basketball league going forward. They break out into a loud cheer, and just like that, with Arnold and Gerald doing their cool little handshake, the episode comes to a seemingly happy ending. However, that absolutely would not be the case on a long-term basis. We wouldn't ever really see any other episodes where Arnold is playing basketball with this team or in this league, despite the ending of this one presenting us with such a solid and valuable life lesson on the importance of teamwork. Nevertheless, that wouldn't stop Coach Whittenberg from making a comeback. And the moment that he did would showcase just how terribly his life had spiraled after driving his YMAA basketball team into the ground. We would see his tragic return in none other than the Season 2 episode, Coach Whittenberg.
We're running out of time, Arnold.
Now, this episode starts out at the bowling alley where Arnold and Gerald are sweating about the deadline for bowling tournament signups being in an hour and them still having no one available to be their coach. I gotta be honest though and say I'm a little surprised that neither of Arnold's grandparents stepped up to the plate here, considering they're both retired and likely don't have much else going on, especially his grandma. I feel like she'd make an awesome bowling team coach considering how great she did at teaching Arnold martial arts in the episode where he got mugged. Plus, it'd just make for a fun episode. But no, we don't get anyone cool like Arnold's grandmother. Instead, as the boys head into the bathroom together, they end up stumbling upon Coach Whittenberg. Or should I say, ex-Coach Whittenberg, as predictably he's been promoted to Custodian Whittenberg at this point. They're shocked to find him struggling to mop the floor, losing a fight with the bucket. And when they talk to him, he ends up explaining how after Arnold left the team, the complaints kept coming and coming, claiming that he was too severe, too harsh, too mean.
To everything except all the things outside of that which they designated me!
Of course, to no one's surprise, he's still doing his same old shtick of talking in circles and somehow saying everything but also saying nothing at the same time. He also talks about how his wife, Tish, took the news of his recumbent firing pretty well, all things considered.
That's the 4th time this year.
But Tish!
First of all, I want to stress that I'm not even being facetious here. He literally said that she took the news pretty well, all things considered. Then they cut to him getting screamed at by his wife and kicked out of the house. I mean, he didn't even seem like he was joking. He really comes across like he genuinely thinks that this is her taking the news well. Which, honestly, has me wondering what her not taking the news well would have looked like. On top of that, though, this also told us that Coach Whittenberg apparently has a pretty deep and rich history of getting fired from jobs. She even goes on to say that she's tired of him losing coaching job after coaching job, which would confirm for us that he has a history of running every team that he tries to coach into the ground. It's a testament to not only his lousy coaching abilities, and specifically that they clearly aren't a new problem, but also the very clear fact that he can't work as part of a team to save his life. I mean, even in a solo job as a custodian, you're part of a team. That building can't function the way it needs to if it isn't clean. And to use a rather outdated saying that I can imagine Coach Whittenberg himself probably living his entire life by, a team is only as strong as its weakest link. And, well, if the man can't even win a battle with a mop bucket, odds are he's the weakest link in nearly any team he approaches. At that, with Tish being exhausted at his tendency to cycle through jobs like they're different seasons of the year, she throws him out of the house, saying to stay out until he cleans up his act. Which, of course, he took literally, hence the cleaning gig at the bowling alley. Just like that, much to Gerald's dismay, Arnold asks custodian Whitberg to be the unpaid coach of their bowling team, which he happily accepts. And it goes just about as terribly as you'd imagine. Just like the basketball episode, it begins with him having all of his players lined up and giving them a completely idiotic talk full of redundancies. However, this time instead of immediately laying out a stupid game plan, he decides to at least take a moment to assess all of their individual skill levels. Being left completely dumbfounded when Rhonda refuses to even put her fingers in the bowling ball out of fear of breaking a nail, and when Eugene nearly tears down the entire house with his unfortunate toss. All in all, he ends up claiming that every single one of them are pathetic, and he screams at them, demanding that they hit the floor and do push-ups for him as if he were some sort of drill instructor. Now, this right here clearly highlights Coach Whittenberg's biggest flaw as a coach. He has no idea how to bring a team together or how to give someone tips to increase their skills in the sport. To him, coaching is seemingly just about barking orders, making himself seem smart and superior, and dishing out punishments whenever he feels like it. I mean, this guy couldn't motivate his way out of a wet paper bag, let alone motivate a team of kids to become an all-star bowling team. At least if it was Arnold's grandma, they'd all probably be having fun and not getting screamed at the entire time. Of course, it comes as a surprise to no one when all of the kids end up pulling Arnold aside and telling him that they want to fire Coach Whittenberg because he's completely ruining this tournament for them. Who would have thought that no one would have fun being yelled at by some old, washed-up, middle-aged guy who's bitter about his failed coaching career? Arnold, though, being the big old softy that he is, tells them all to hang on and just give him a chance to talk to the coach first and see if he can get him to lighten up a little bit.
You've come to fire me, haven't you, Arnold?
Well,
Oh man, I knew it! It's happening again, repetitively!
Now, Coach Whittenberg, why would you think something like that? Why would you possibly assume that Arnold showing up at your house out of nowhere would automatically mean that you're fired? Could that maybe be because you know that your approach to coaching is absolutely atrocious and it fails every time, but for some reason you still refuse to change your tactics even slightly? Maybe because you know what you're doing is just ruining it for everybody? Honestly, this is just one of the most frustrating aspects about his character. It feels like somewhere in there, deep down inside his empty brain, is a little bit of self-awareness. However, that bit of awareness isn't enough to get him to alter his actions or present himself any better. No, it's just enough to make him wallow in his own self-pity when he feels like trash for doing the same idiotic thing over and over again. Don't get me wrong, the guy at one point had every right to have these kinds of feelings, but 4 coaching jobs later and still no changes made? I mean, come on. At what point do you analyze the common denominator and realize that you yourself are the problem? Honestly, one can only hope that maybe this right here is that moment. But not gonna hold my breath. So as Arnold sits there reassuring Coach Whittenberg that he isn't getting fired, he ends up explaining that he was actually sent to ask him to maybe lighten up a bit and try to take a new approach to coaching instead of just being a massive jerk to everyone on the team when he's angry. At first, it kind of feels like all this goes over Coach Whittenberg's head as he's just kind of nodding along, happy that he's not being fired. However, I am surprised to say that Arnold actually ends up getting through to this guy. He hears Arnold out and declares that from this moment on, he's going to turn a new limb and start coaching by using Psychocology. And he actually ends up sticking to the sentiment behind this as well. When their next bowling practice comes around, Eugene completely fails to get the ball down the center of the lane, and Coach Whittenberg gets angry at first, before taking a deep breath and giving a new approach a try.
Okay, Red, the elemental thing, situationally speaking, is, don't worry about it.
He ends up giving Eugene some very specific and rather peculiar advice. He says instead of focusing on bowling and winning, when he's about to make a throw, instead think about his favorite food and how much he loves it. Which, crazily enough, works like a charm and gets Eugene throwing strikes like no other. From there, the coach ends up pulling out a teen girl magazine and talking to Rhonda about this article he saw about how many cool girls are bowling nowadays, which immediately gets her interested and leads to her bringing a new level of focus, honing in her game much like Eugene did. From there, we get a nice montage of all these kids coming together, bringing their A game and having fun while doing it, all the while making their coach proud. Which, it's insane to say that this moment right here showed us that somewhere deep down inside of Coach Whittenberg actually is a semi-decent coach. He just apparently needs help to get there from someone who actually understands people and teamwork a lot better than he does. He clearly understands that bringing a team of people together isn't about making them miserable and forcing them to do push-ups. It's about fostering an environment where everyone can thrive working in unison. The thing is, it really is just a matter of how long that Coach Whittenberg is able to keep up this positive mindset. I mean, the man's been set in his ways for so long that honestly it's hard to accept a change like this sticking unless it really does stick around for a long time. Just like that, though, we cut to the day of the big bowling tournament where Coach Whittenberg gives his team a nice pep talk, telling them that irregardless of what happens, they're the greatest team of bowlers that has ever been his prerogative to teach. His hilariously stupid pep talk is cut short, though, when their rival team enters the bowling alley. A team of girls being coached by none other than Coach Whittenberg's wife, Tish.
Are you and your team ready to learn a thing or two about bowling? For i.e., how it is wherein we will administrate to you a serious whipping.
Now, just when I thought that it couldn't get any worse than Coach Whittenberg, Tish absolutely smokes him in making herself sound like an overconfident moron. For i.e., how it is where and we will administer to you is almost impressive to have come out of her mouth. It's almost like a tongue twister for the brain trying to make sense of it. I feel like I'm smelling burnt toast just hearing her say literally one sentence.
Confidence-wise, I am absolutely and incomprehensibly confident in the abilities of this said team.
From there, the bowling tournament commences with the two teams remaining neck and neck for nearly the entire thing, until Arnold's team starts falling apart and losing steam, causing Coach Whittenberg to get frustrated due to the added-on mocking from his wife, which, of course, causes him to go right back to his old ways. When one of them makes a mistake, he just gets angry, screaming at them and demanding that they hit the floor to give him push-ups. It's no shock whatsoever when things just fall apart from there. He treats his entire team like garbage, and of course, they end up playing like garbage as a result. After all of this progress, all it took was a little bit of prodding from his wife for everything to just crumble and fall right back to square one, leaving all of them right where they had started. Arnold tries to talk to him, saying that winning isn't everything and pointing out that everything was going great until his wife showed up. However, Coach Whittenberg completely shuts Arnold down, saying that this has absolutely nothing to do with Tish and everything to do with being willing to do whatever it takes to secure a win, even if it means being a complete dipwad to a bunch of children.
It's the only way I can prove I'm a good coach.
But haven't you already proven that? You treated us as individuals and thusly helped us reach a potentiality that we never knew we had.
Now, this moment right here just has me dying inside a little bit. Arnold knows good and well that if he's gonna get through to Coach Whittenberg, he needs to get down on his level and start talking like an overconfident moron himself. And hilariously enough, Coach Whittenberg responds saying some of that made sense, implying that he only understood the latter half of Arnold's sentence where he started mirroring Coach Whittenberg's talking style. It's honestly baffling because this moment really does prove to us just how much smarter that Arnold, a literal child, is than Coach Whittenberg. Arnold could straight up coach circles around this guy. Like, this whole time, Arnold has been straight up preaching about psychology and how powerful it can be, just to end up using psychology to coach the coach into being a better coach. Honestly, I'm not really sure if this is a testament to just how intelligent that Arnold is in this department, or if it's just a testament to how Coach Whittenberg is less intelligent than a fourth grader. Regardless, Arnold ends up pleading with Coach Whittenberg, telling him that he's been a really good coach to them since he'd started taking a different approach, and he really doesn't want him to give up on it now. Which ends up resonating with the guy as he approaches Eugene, who is facing a difficult 6-7 split, and instead of pressuring him on the situation, he encourages him to just think about his favorite food like he did before. And just like last time, Eugene ends up coming through with the spare, perfectly clutching the win while he focuses on none other than strained beats of all things. As everyone celebrates Coach Whittenberg for coming to his senses and bringing the team together, which, I mean, in my opinion, they should be celebrating Arnold, but whatever. The coach ends up exchanging glances with his wife as we cut to later that evening, where we see her at a drive-up burger stand enjoying a burger in her car by herself. Moments later, her husband drives up and parks next to her as the two share a glance yet again. He smiles at her before getting out and joining her in her car, which is where this episode comes to an end. Now, the thing is, this ending is actually loaded with a lot of context as it pertains to the real core of this episode and Coach Whittenberg as a whole. The truth is, this isn't really an episode about bowling or Arnold's team. This one is about Coach Whittenberg and specifically his failing marriage. The overall point of this one was to treat bowling as an analogy for just how much his marriage would benefit from him understanding psychology and knowing how to be a better team player. That's a point that's elaborated on a lot more over the next few episodes as they mainly revolve around the coach and his wife. But this beginning point here for their saga is a huge one to take in. Early on in this episode, when Coach Whittenberg is explaining to Arnold how he got kicked out of the house by his wife, who was angry at him for losing coaching job after coaching job, he tells Arnold about how when he was up in his feelings, he went to this same exact burger joint to seek comfort in some food. With that in mind, this spot serves as a lot more than just a burger joint. It's got emotional weight behind it as a place that the coach goes to when he's sulking. At that, it's interesting to take in that his wife was here sulking after she herself had been revealed to be a fellow coach, and she had just lost the tournament they were both in. It puts a pretty different spin on literally everything here. First of all, it kind of points to a potentially recurring cycle where they compete to see who is the better coach, repeatedly hurting each other in the process. I mean, isn't it a little odd that he seemingly just knew that she would be at this burger joint? Granted, he could have simply just been coming here for food and ran into her by chance, but still it feels like this is a place they've been in and a cycle that they've been in before. On top of that, in the very ending scene where he gets into her car, they go out of their way to really emphasize her saying,
Hey, coach.
almost as if either him being a coach and holding a position like that is something that's important to her and her interest in him. Speculation aside, this episode confirmed that the two of them without a doubt are extremely competitive in nature, especially with one another. Which that alone could even play a bit of a role in her kicking him out of the house. In all reality, instead of anger at him not keeping down a coaching job, that really could just be her kind of asserting herself as the better coach of the two and putting him in his place. I mean, we did see Arnold end up visiting him in a completely different place, which he likely couldn't afford to rent if him and his wife were in some desperate financial struggle due to his inability to hold down a job. All in all though, one thing is true without a doubt. Though the whole bowling tournament situation was resolved and figured out, this one left us with a pretty clear understanding that Coach Whittenberg's marriage absolutely is not figured out. him winning this time isn't going to fix the ongoing long-term dispute between him and his wife. The only things that have even a chance of approaching that situation and maybe doing a little bit of work in it are therapy and what Coach Whittenberg calls psychocology. Whereas the first episode proved to be an important lesson in working as a team in general, this one served to show the importance of not only working as a team, but understanding the minimum psychology of how to interact with other humans in a way that makes you not completely hated by everyone around you. Interestingly enough, though, perhaps the most critical but subtle vessel to portray this lesson was Coach Whittenberg and Tish. A big part of this episode was focused around the importance of sticking together as a team, whether you win or lose, which was told very directly through Arnold's bowling team. All the while, the same message is indirectly delivered through this struggling married couple. Just as much as the coach himself struggles to be a team player, clearly his wife does also. When he loses, she throws him out angrily. When he wins, she takes him back happily. That's not to say someone should stay in a marriage they're unhappy in, especially if their partner never pulls their own weight. However, it is to say that marriage isn't all sunshine and rainbows always. In marriage, some days your team loses. And when that happens, you can either choose to walk away or you can power through this rough game and keep in it with your team for the long haul. If you can't face a handful of rainy days with your team, then you might not want to be a part of literally any team, because no marriage on the face of this earth has 365 endless, happy, positive sunshine and rainbow days in a year. In a way, as much as these two are opposites on a personal level, they genuinely are a lot alike on a psychological level, especially when it comes to the topic of winning. Coach is quick to panic, freak out, and bully people when his team loses. All the while, Tish is quick to push the rest of her team away and kick them out when she's losing. This one is an interesting episode to take in as far as introducing us to their marriage goes, because it puts a lot of things into context and lays some pretty important foundation. But the cracks in that foundation genuinely end up going a lot deeper than just the ones they clearly show on face value. The next episode to feature Coach Whittenberg would be the one that really pulls back the curtain on his relationship with Tish and shows us a lot more of a direct look at that exact lesson that the last episode told through its subcontext. That would be none other than the Season 3 episode, Best Man. Now, interestingly enough, this episode comes swinging right out the gate with a reminder of the lesson that the last episode with Coach Whittenberg taught us. It begins with Arnold, Stinky, and Helga walking down the street as she complains at Arnold for costing them the baseball game against the 5th graders by going for a bunt. She says that Wolfgang threw him a cream puff of a throw and he could have easily knocked a home run instead of bunting. However, Stinky defends Arnold's call, saying that it was the right choice with Iggy being on third, and that given the circumstances, it was best to just try to ensure that he could run it through by the grace of the bunt and lock in the win. Sadly, that's not how it worked out, and the play lost them the game. But Arnold says sometimes you have to make sacrifices so the team can win, and even if they don't win, they're still a team.
There's nothing more important than sticking together as a team, whether you win or lose.
Of course, Helga laughs him off, and as her and Stinky walk away, like clockwork with just the most perfect timing, Coach Whittenberg runs up to Arnold from the front of his house, saying that he's been looking for him all over the neighborhood, repetitively. He says that he has to talk to Arnold, conversationally speaking, revealing that he and his wife, Tish, are getting remarried again for a second time this upcoming Saturday. Now, I'm honestly pretty curious about this because we all know that Coach Whittenberg is known for speaking in idiotic redundancies. It's honestly hard to tell if he just doesn't understand that what he's saying sounds off, or if he's actually really intending to say the words that are just kind of falling out of his mouth. Like when he says they're getting remarried again for the second time. Does he mean that this is their second time getting remarried? So like their third marriage to one another total? Or is he just pseudo-intellectually trying to explain that this is their second time getting married, not realizing that he's multiplying the number of times with each unintended semantic inflation via redundant phrasing? Honestly, when it comes to Coach Whittenberg, this is one of the most hilarious but frustrating parts of his character. It's hard to actually understand what he's trying to say sometimes because he says things like remarried again, where the prefix re and the word again are doing the same exact job in the statement. That's not even considering the way he dogpiles for the second time at the end of that same statement as well. I mean, between the redundant marking and the way he constantly uses the wrong word because it kind of sounds right, it gets incredibly sloppy as far as understanding and unpacking literally any of the drivel that leaves this man's mouth. Regardless of how many times he and Tish have been married, Coach Whittenberg is here to beg Arnold to be the best man at his next wedding. Naturally, Arnold questions his choice of a 4th grade kid that he barely knows to be his best man, and sadly, but also to no one's surprise, Coach Whittenberg explains that he has no friends whatsoever and that Arnold is the closest thing he has to a friend. Which, I mean, how sad is that? This guy has legitimately not a single friend in this world. And he doesn't ever really stop to look in the mirror and ask why. He doesn't take a moment to wonder if maybe he's the reason that nobody gets close to him. The lack of self-awareness with this guy is just so legitimately painful.
You believed in me when nobody else did. You're my only real true friend, Arnie. And I want you to be my best man.
Arnold agrees, quickly realizing that he's getting thrust into something a lot more than he expected. Being tasked with inviting all of his friends, finding ushers, a ring bearer, and picking suits for everyone. He doesn't scoff for even a second at it, but can you believe the audacity of this man? It's his second or possibly third wedding, and he's putting all of these massive responsibilities on a 9-year-old who barely knows him, who he calls his best friend. It's funny because in all reality, choosing Arnold in this case isn't even about him and Arnold being friends or anything like that. Coach Whittenberg more or less needed a team put together yet again, and he's seen firsthand that Arnold is excellent at putting together a solid team. There's a pretty good chance that him using the best friend angle is just manipulation, and that at the core of it all, this choice is just about making things easy for himself and passing almost all of the responsibilities that he can onto someone he knows is responsible enough to handle them. Of course, I'll fully recognize that this point may come across as me assuming the worst of Coach Whittenberg and being presumptive of his intentions, but I promise you this point will make a lot more sense when we check out the next episode. That one fully exposes his manipulative nature in the most disastrous and messed up way possible. As far as this one goes, from here we oddly enough jump to Helga walking through the park with Tish of all people. She says that since Helga was the captain of her bowling team, and because her cousin Connie is out of town, she was hoping that Helga would be willing to be the maid of honor at her wedding to Coach Whittenberg. As you'd imagine, Helga passes on the offer, not really being much of the wedding type. That is, until Tish pulls this out of her back pocket.
That's too bad, because your little friend Arnold's gonna be the coach's best man. I thought it would have been cute to watch you two walk down the aisle.
So Helga, as per usual, delves right into a daydream about her deep love for Arnold, and we see her imagining a wedding between the two of them. However, this one really is such a weird moment to take in, especially because we have so little context on Tish as a person at this point. I mean, we know that she's a lot like her husband as far as intelligence and a general psychological aspect are concerned. However, we don't know if she's as manipulative as he is, and just how far that manipulation reaches at this point. We haven't seen any of that at all firsthand from her. But, could she somehow know that Helga has a crush on Arnold? I mean, what are the odds of her just purely thinking that it'd be cute for the two of them to walk down the aisle together as maid of honor and best man? Why would Tish be blindly shipping children she barely knows? It's just weird. But if we keep in mind again that she's a lot like her husband, who there's a good chance that he's manipulating Arnold by guilting him with the best friend angle, then maybe Tish herself came into this conversation with Helga ready to manipulate her in a similar way that her husband did with Arnold. Again, I could be completely wrong and just assuming the worst of Tish, but you have to admit the circumstances of her pitching this idea are genuinely pretty odd. Back to Helga's daydream though, she starts verbally shouting "I do" over and over again while she imagines her wedding to Arnold, leaving Tish confused.
Why are you screaming, "I do, I do"?
Because I do agree to be your maid of honor.
So from there, we see the wedding parties preparing for the big day. The boys getting all suited up and Tish helping Helga get her dress ready. Really quick, I just want to point out though how odd it is that there doesn't seem to be any tailors or alteration specialists there to help with any of them getting all fitted. It's just these boys on their own and Tish personally helping Helga with her dress. And I mean, it stays this way throughout the entire episode. Even into the wedding. The entire time, we don't see any family members of either Coach or Tish. I mean, we see the wedding officiant, but that's about it. It's a little odd, and it makes me wonder just how many bridges that Coach and his wife have burned in their lifetime because they have, no one. But as far as Helga and her one-on-one time with Tish goes, we end up seeing this happen.
We just need to make a few little altercations and you'll look like an angel.
Altercations, huh?
Now, Tish starts telling Helga all about how when she was her age, she first met her husband Jack, and that she was too shy to tell him that she liked him. So instead, to cover her tracks and make sure nobody knew, she bullied him relentlessly, making fun of him, calling him names, challenging him in sports because he hates to lose, all just to egg him on. Of course, this catches Helga's attention as she basically sees this as a pretty easy way to sum up the way that she treats Arnold. Helga doesn't want people knowing that she has a crush on him, so she does everything that she can to make it seem like she hates him. To make it so no one could ever imagine the thought of the two of them together. This is actually kind of a big moment for Helga, though. I mean, this is her seeing that Tish was once in her shoes, bullying the boy that she had a crush on to make it so her crush stays a secret. And even through all of that, she'd still ended up marrying that guy someday. For Helga, this is a moment of realization that perhaps if she plays her card right, she could someday have a similar outcome with Arnold. She needs to keep in mind, however, that Tish and her husband don't exactly have the healthiest of marriage, and they're not really the best example to follow. I mean, sure, their issues are certainly due to way more complex issues than just her bullying him when they were kids, but in all reality, it doesn't bode well as a precursor and example of what Helga's future goal relationship could look like. From there, though, Tish explains what her and Jack getting together looked like. She says that one day she challenged him to a game of whack-a-mole and he ended up letting her win. Neither of them spoke a word about it and she just continued on acting like she was none the wiser, but internally that was her hint that he liked her. And the two of them have been tighter than shrunken clothes ever since.
And now we're getting remarried again, repetitively for the second time.
At that, we cut on over to Arnold and Coach Whittenberg, who just left a jewelry store empty-handed and instead opted for a toy ring from a 25-cent machine. The two walk down the street as the coach confidently talks to Arnold about how there are two things of the utmost impotence to him in life: Tish and winning. Curious, Arnold stops him, asking if Tish comes first before winning in his eyes. And of course, with zero hesitation at all, he says, of course not. Coach Whittenberg tells him that Tish is a close second. Unless they count air hockey, then Tish might actually be third. It seems to be a bit of a tough top three for this guy. And really quick, let's just stop, take a step back, and look at the wide angle of the puzzle here. Coach Whittenberg, having just gone to a jewelry store and not even being able to buy their cheapest ring, ended up walking down the street confidently with his best man, a 9-year-old with astronomically more emotional intelligence and awareness than he has, and a toy ring worth a quarter, spouting off about how winning and the game of air hockey are way more important than the woman that he's about to promise the rest of his life to for the second or possibly third time now. I mean, what a piece of garbage. This dude is just such a slime ball. And it's not even the 25-cent ring, too. That's just kind of funny, but it's totally okay. That's meant to be simply a symbol of affection, and the price isn't really a value of their love. However, in combination with how low he puts Tish on the totem pole compared to things in life that don't matter at all, that symbol of affection ends up being tainted in a pretty sad way. I mean, the man puts winning as number one always without even a further thought, but what does the scope of winning even mean to him? Little League baseball? YMAA basketball? Kids bowling at a local bowling alley? What's next? Children's synchronized swimming? I mean, he cares more about winning than his own relationship, which should never be the case in my personal opinion. But on top of that, it's not like he's some massive big shot football player with like a chance at winning a Super Bowl ring or something like that. he's a washed-up, failed youth coach with a 25-cent ring for a woman that he cares less about than air hockey, a game that also costs 25 cents to play. It really makes you wonder what he thinks Tish is worth. At minimum, we're looking at maybe 50 cents if you're lucky, but only because he can't play air hockey by himself. So, of course, in this moment, we have this complete degenerate crimson chin but just the chin looking dude who just keeps digging himself deeper and deeper into the depths of the dump, right? Just shoveling himself further into a hole of garbage. What could possibly spice things up even more, you might ask? How could this situation get any better than it already is? Well, it turns out that this Neanderthal living in the 90s had the bright idea to have this conversation with Arnold right in front of Tish's house. So she heard every last bit. Even down to him saying that it's winning, air hockey, and Tish, pretty much in that order. Understandably, she's hurt as we see her break out into tears, trying her best to keep quiet so he doesn't know that she heard him from around the corner. This moment right here really is an interesting one because we're all well aware that Tish isn't afraid of conflict. She's thrown him out of the house, yelled at him, publicly humiliated him, and challenged him at nearly every single opportunity presented. However, right here, she chooses not to confront him. There's a few complex reasons for that. First of all, as far as emotions go between Coach Whittenberg and Tish, the story she told Helga really did say a lot in its undertones. The whole situation with him letting her win whack-a-mole is a textbook example of how they oftentimes let the constant competition between the two of them do all of their emotional weightlifting. She didn't even talk to him about her feelings after that moment when he let her win, and she just kind of took it as a sign that he liked her. Fast forwarding all this time to the day before their second or possibly third wedding, when she hears him saying something incredibly hurtful, she could be choosing to not have that verbal conversation or likely altercation, because she knows they communicate best when it's done through competition, oftentimes over something small like whack-a-mole. On top of that, it's a classic case of repressed emotions, like how she hid her feelings from him by bullying him when they were younger. She struggles with openly sharing feelings. On that note, she's actively crying as a result of what he said. Oftentimes, people with repressed emotions really struggle with crying in front of others, and you can't really blame her for not wanting to cry in front of Coach Whittenberg of all people. Probably the least understanding and empathetic recurring character in this entire cartoon universe. Just like that, we fast forward to the night of the wedding rehearsal where things take a pretty quick turn for the worse. Tish and Coach sit down to eat, and with her being hurt emotionally, she challenges him, knowing that losing hurts him emotionally and wanting to lash out at him for being such a jerk behind her back. Ultimately, the two end up having multiple eating competitions, jumping rope, and even paper football, among many other things, before he gets fed up and decides to challenge her to one final competition. One-on-one air hockey tomorrow morning for the whole enchilada. Winner is number one, no matter what, no questions asked.
As of this present time and moment, the wedding is off temporarily and forever.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
That's right, just like that, the wedding is off, temporarily and forever. Thankfully though, Arnold is able to talk some sense into Coach Whittenberg. As the two talk at the arcade later on, Arnold gets him to admit that Tish really is more important to him than winning. However, at this point, it's a little too late of a realization considering the wedding has already been called off. Luckily for Coach Whittenberg, Arnold has an idea for how he could possibly pull things together right at the last second. The one thing that Arnold is able to see from a mile away without being given any of the extra context that even Helga got from Tish. Of course, letting her win the air hockey game. It's a really interesting one because, again, Arnold knows about as much about Tish and Coach's relationship as he's able to gather himself through his own observations. Coach Whittenberg doesn't really talk about his wife very much, as opposed to Tish, who was talking at great lengths to Helga about the context of their complicated marriage. It speaks volumes to Arnold's emotional and situational awareness as it pertains to other people's relationships, not really his own romantic pursuits. He's able to see from a mile away that Tish values winning almost as much as her husband does, but in a different way. Whereas he simply wants to win, she wants to win number one in his eyes. She wants to be above winning and air hockey in her husband's mind. Which, I mean, if we're being honest, that really isn't a lot to ask in the context of a normal relationship. But in the context of a relationship with a selfish guy like Coach Whittenberg, who cares more about winning than his own wife, it's apparently an awful lot to ask. Asking him to prioritize his wife over winning at stupid games like air hockey is like asking him to forego his pride. Because keep in mind, he doesn't really have much anymore. His pride is no longer tied to a team or a job that he's passionate about. At this point, the only wins he sees are in small things like air hockey. It really just boils down to him showing a willingness to forego his personal conquest in the name of being best and actually prioritizing his partner, as is the basis of any solid relationship. Again, it's like a team, and we all know Coach Whittenberg isn't the best team player. In the context of a team, it's important to let every teammate have time to shine. Not just break off from the team and start your own one-person team because you're confident you can get the spotlight and gain the win 100% of the time on your own. It's reminiscent of the very first episode we saw Coach Whittenberg in. Of course, the one where he tries to force his basketball team to completely revolve around passing the ball to his son Tucker. He completely failed in running a team, so it's no surprise that when it comes to being in a relationship, which itself is a team in a way, he would completely fail to see anything from his partner's point of view. Speaking of Tucker, though, it's odd to realize that he's nowhere to be found in this episode. His parents are having a wedding, and he's not there for the rehearsal or even for the actual wedding itself. As a matter of fact, it's also kind of weird that Arnold didn't bring up Tucker in the conversation of why Coach chose Arnold to be the best man in his wedding. That would have opened up the door to at least excuse Tucker's absence here. But unfortunately, it's like Tucker never even existed. I mean, if Coach is going to choose any 9-year-old boy to be his best man, you'd think it'd be his own son, but apparently not. I honestly can't help but wonder if that bridge was yet another one that Coach Whittenberg burned to the ground, or if maybe the writers of the show just decided to retcon Tucker's existence into oblivion for the rest of the series.
What do you love more, winning or your wife?
So we cut to the next day where the air hockey game to decide who is the best once and for all is well underway. Coach Whittenberg and Tish go neck and neck until eventually they reach a 10-10 tie, with the next goal being the winning shot. As the puck flies back and forth rapidly, the coach looks down, well aware of what's happening on the mini air-fueled field, hearing Arnold's words echo in his mind. Just like that, he makes the conscious decision to move his mallet to the side ever so slyly and let Tish win the game. As you can imagine, she immediately jumps to gloating and telling him that she won, claiming her spot on the throne as number one once and for all. Which he shockingly agrees with, finally telling her the one thing she's wanted to hear all along, that she is number one. Which, keep in mind, to her isn't about actually winning first place. It's about being number one in his eyes.
What did you say, Jack?
I said you're right, Tish. You beat me. You're the best. You're number one.
She just melts in his arms, saying that's the first time that he's ever said that to her. Obviously clinging to the deeper meaning to that statement more than Coach Whittenberg will ever understand, but nevertheless he enjoys his victory as the two head to the chapel for their wedding. They both stand on the stage in front of the officiant with Arnold and Helga by their sides as they both say "I do."
Repetitively.
And you, Coach Whittenberg.
Also, repetitively.
And they share a nice high five after he proclaims them still husband and wife, which, I mean, I think that implies the two of them never really got an official divorce, right? If this guy is going out of his way to say still married instead of now remarried, that genuinely comes across with the understanding that things are just kind of staying the same, does it not? Which, of course, they can still do a ceremony to celebrate getting back together after a separation. I mean, that's totally okay, and I wouldn't ever try to argue someone choosing to do that. But still, the way they worded it previously made it sound like they had gotten divorced and remarried multiple times, when in all reality, it seems that their definition of getting remarried is just very different from my definition of the term remarried. To them, that just encompasses taking a break and getting back together after that break, apparently. I mean, with this context, it makes sense that this wedding is the way that it is. Instead of all sorts of family members and people they're celebrating, it's just a bunch of kids who practically threw the whole thing together themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if their family decided after the second wedding that they weren't going to foot the bill if there was a third one. Hence why the audience in this chapel is full of people they don't even really know. Everyone probably decided they were done with this after the first couple go-rounds. From there, though, as the wedding winds down, Coach Whittenberg challenges his wife to a race to the car, and when they get there, he thanks Arnold for the help, only to get questioned by Tish about if he threw the air hockey game on purpose, to which he doesn't say no, but instead just argues, trying to remind her that she is number one. That her true competitive nature comes out as she gets angry and challenges him to an immediate rematch instead of going on a honeymoon. And as he accepts, hopping into the car, the two speed off toward the arcade, leaving all of us right back at square one yet again. Interestingly enough, though, this ending could lead to a lot bigger of an ultimate outcome. Remember how I brought up earlier that it seems as if competition is their way of dealing with feelings instead of talking about them? Well, Tish choosing this time to bring up Coach throwing the game instead of letting him do that as a form of dealing with their problems like he did previously could be an indicator of her being fed up with bottling up feelings for so long and sweeping confrontations under the rug. She says that when they first met, the basis of their relationship was him throwing a game of whack-a-mole and them never talking about it again. Then we saw her overhearing hurtful things that he was saying and holding back her feelings, instead choosing to attack him through hitting his need to win as opposed to just talking through these feelings. At the end, when she does finally decide to confront him for purposefully throwing the game head on, that could indicate a willingness to kind of leave behind doing things like that as an excuse for emotional communication and instead wanting to work things out verbally from that point on. Which, if that really was the case, is something that Coach Whittenberg has a slim chance of being able to keep up with and survive in this relationship. He's always struggled with his emotions. Other than anger and excitement, there doesn't really seem to be much of an in-between for him. I can't imagine him being able to thrive in a relationship with someone who isn't as emotionally constipated as he is. I mean, it would take some pretty extreme laxatives, milk of magnesia, prunes, coffee, Metamucil, and quite the uptick in his water intake to work that blockage out of his emotional void. In the long run, though, that could be kind of what sets up the basis for this next episode. Her being willing to approach emotions and him just struggling to even think about that. Potentially doing whatever he can to unpack whatever emotional baggage he's subconsciously carrying in a desperate act to save his marriage. Before we move on though, really quickly, I want to circle back to the significance of the beginning of this episode and them going out of their way to tell us in detail about Arnold's experience with the baseball game that took place moments before this episode starts. There was some pretty massive symbolism behind Arnold making that bunt and sacrificing his own all-star home run on the easy throw that Wolfgang tossed him in the name of trying to guarantee a win for the whole team. Sure, it may not have worked out the way he wanted it to, but Arnold was still a team player and did everything that he could to put the best interest of the team above his own personal gain and getting the spotlight in that moment. He can at least say that he tried his best and thought of the team first in the decisions that he made along the way. I feel like this could have possibly been foreshadowing the fact that things might not work long-term between Coach Whittenberg and Tish. I mean, the last episode stressed the importance of their team working together and trying to understand each other psychologically. Meanwhile, this one opens up with a piggyback on that exact message. Then we see this whole episode unfold, and by the end, Coach losing the air hockey game is essentially akin to Arnold taking the bunt. He did that for the betterment of the team that him and Tish are both a part of. It's like Arnold's experience with that baseball team is meant to be a metaphor for Coach Whittenberg's marriage. However, the fact that it didn't work out for Arnold in that baseball story despite his best efforts feels like it's essentially foreshadowing the ending of Tish and Coach's story as one that doesn't prevail in the long term. Of course, it's not directly stated, but I wouldn't be surprised if, much like how Arnold's plan didn't work out despite his best intentions, Coach and Tish's marriage doesn't work out despite his best intentions here. The thing is, too, this isn't all on Coach Whittenberg. To compare it to Arnold's baseball game, he can bunt in hopes for a secured win all he wants, but unless Iggy makes that run from third to home without issue, they won't win. One player's actions can't be the deciding factor of whether or not the entire team wins, just like the first episode we checked out taught us. They have to work together in order for things to play out properly and in order to thrive in the long run. But even then, sometimes working together just isn't enough. As far as the next and final episode to feature Coach Whittenberg, it's one that comes ripe with emotions to unpack for the very first time as far as his character goes. However, not of course without doing so at the expense of Arnold and his friends. This would be none other than the Season 4 episode, Synchronized Swimming. This one starts out with Arnold and his friends simply just enjoying the pool on a nice sunny day when all of a sudden Coach Whittenberg walks up literally out of nowhere and says that he saw how good they are at swimming, situationally speaking. Just like that, Gerald comes up out of nowhere and pulls Arnold aside, saying that they need to stay away from Coach Whittenberg because every time they get involved with that guy, he lures them onto some crazy team that he's cooked up. Arnold, however, tells Gerald to chill, assuring him that he's not gonna volunteer them for some crazy team of his.
Boys, I want you to join this crazy team of mine. Have any of you done much synchronistic swimming?
He explains that he volunteered to put together a swim team and that he was hoping they'd all be up for it considering they were such a good team for him to coach previously. But naturally, all of these boys, except for Eugene, have completely no interest in synchronized swimming, comparing it to ballet in the water. As they all walk off, even dragging Eugene with them, Coach Whittenberg drops to his knees and starts begging, saying that this is the very last coaching job in the city and that he may never get to coach again. So right here, there are just so many questions that come to mind. What led to him burning every bridge with every coaching job in the city? Has he legitimately failed that miserably at every single team he's ever coached? I mean, if that's the case, if the kids were to just agree to this in the name of keeping this guy in his career of coaching, they'd really just be enabling him more or less. Like, getting fired from every single coaching job in the city is a surefire sign that you're pursuing the wrong career field. Whether you desperately want to work in that field or not, he's clearly not getting the memo that he isn't cut out for coaching and is instead trying to manipulate his way into keeping his foot in the door by twisting the arms of some kids into being on a team for him to get one last shot at coaching. At that, with all of these kids not wanting to partake in anything that he has to offer, Coach Whittenberg feels the need to resort to extreme measures. He starts climbing the high dive, saying that he doesn't know how to swim and that he's gonna jump if they don't agree to join his team.
Wait, Coach!
Don't jump! We'll join your stupid team!
You will.
Oh God, I'm not gonna lie, I already did not like Coach Whittenberg going into this video, but this moment really was just the nail in the coffin. Seeing him full-blown threaten himself like that, all in the name of manipulating these children into doing what he wanted, just makes my blood boil. I just hate this guy with such a deep passion, and no words could really put it into perspective. I mean, I've worked as a 911 dispatcher and legitimately heard people make threats like this in real life, usually at the expense of other adults, which itself, in my opinion, is a pretty low thing to do. You have to usually be in a pretty dark spot in life to be making choices like that. However, for this man to be making threats like that at the expense of literal children, and all just because he wants to coach a team? It's just disgusting. If anything so far didn't convince you of how deplorable that this guy is, I like to hope that this scenario would definitely open your eyes to it. However, if it didn't, well, I'm confident that what happens next will, without a shadow of a doubt. So with his new team freshly assembled, he shouts at them angrily that their first practice is on Monday after school and that they better not be late, which is when they all walk off, except for Arnold, who sticks around to talk to Coach Whittenberg. As soon as the other kids are out of earshot, he lets out a big sigh and confides in Arnold, saying that he wasn't confident that the old "I can't swim, I'm gonna jump" trick was gonna work. Which, God, do I even need to explain this one? Him calling it a trick confirms that this is all just an act and that he probably does know how to swim. He was just manipulating his way into yet another situation that he so desperately craves. Honestly, it's just so sad that Arnold lets him get away with this too. Like, putting on an act and pretending to threaten your own livelihood to manipulate little kids is probably one of the most offensively disturbing things that an adult could do to kids while skirting through a legal gray area. I'm not sure if that breaks any laws, but morally it is incredibly corrupt and just gross. It shows just how low that Coach Whittenberg keeps his morals and how far he's willing to go to get what he wants in life. He doesn't care if a display like this psychologically damages children. He doesn't care if they end up being forced into something they aren't comfortable with. As long as he gets to live his dream of winning, he's happy to disregard whoever gets trampled on or traumatized along the way. What's even more messed up as well is that we learn that this whole thing goes yet again much deeper than just the simple obsessive need to win. This is yet again another stupid competition that he's stuck in with his wife. As he stands there pretty much spilling the beans to Arnold that he was faking it, Tish walks up, not surprised that he'd do something that awful.
You had to stoop to the old "I can't swim, I'm gonna jump" trick to get a syncopated swimming team together, huh, Coach?
It worked, didn't it?
Now, I don't know what's worse. The fact that Tish goes from calling it a sycophantic swimming team to a sympathetic swimming team without ever actually properly saying synchronized swimming team even once in this whole interaction. Or the fact that she doesn't press Jack further on his scummy behavior. I mean, I can't imagine being married to a person who would be willing to manipulate children like this. As if the way he treats these kids in every other episode wasn't bad enough. I just can't imagine witnessing my partner do something like this firsthand and still having respect for them. Regardless, she basically gloats to Coach Whittenberg, saying that she knows him well and that he doesn't have the sensitivity or emotional wherewithal to put together an artsy-fartsy swim team routine.
We're not in touch with your soft, artistical interior thought patterns.
I'll show you, Tish.
At that, we cut to Coach Whittenberg showing the boys a video of a synchronized swimming team and talking about the basic fundamentals, explaining all about how he, quote, half-heartedly believes they repossess the skills to consummate a winning status. However, all the boys aren't buying it. They say that this just looks dumb and that they don't really see what's artsy about being in a pool with other people and making a flower shape with your legs. Nevertheless, that doesn't stop Coach Whittenberg from forcing them into the pool for a rather awkward, clunky, and painful practice. When that proves to go nowhere though, he steps back, taking the lessons out of the pool and back onto dry land.
Boys, we are making large steps of progressive movement in practicing the sport of circumcised swimming.
Wait a second, did he just... is he talking about circumcised... never mind. This guy's full-blown dumber than SpongeBob in front of the orb of confusion. So, with them having made progress, he decides that it's time for them to practice along with some music. Unfortunately, though, that just kind of makes things worse. Everyone ends up hating the song, which was picked by Eugene, and to make matters even more tough for them all, Wolfgang catches sight of them and ends up recording them all attempting to dance very terribly. Ultimately, the frustration between that and the struggles with getting it right leads to all of them quitting and walking off, except for Arnold, of course, who always sticks behind to talk to Coach Whittenberg. At that, he confides in Arnold, saying that his wife was right and that he doesn't have a single sensitive bone in his body. Which, let's just be honest, is a pretty surprising level of self-awareness from Coach Whittenberg. But furthermore, highlights what I brought up right before we got into this episode. It could very well be the case that Tish is having a hard time with wanting to be able to have emotional talks with her husband. However, she's struggling with him having the emotional awareness of a peanut. She likely suggests him to be more sensitive, but he struggles with that as someone who's always been repressed emotionally. This is presented as a simple synchronized swimming competition, but as far as Tish, Coach, and their marriage goes, it seems to be about quite a bit more underneath that. It's about his emotions being called into question while she's possibly working on growing emotionally herself, feeling like he isn't trying to grow whatsoever as a person, emotionally or otherwise. That could potentially explain the whole sudden vested interest in synchronized swimming, something that we've never really seen Coach Whittenberg pursue previously. It's his last-ditch effort at keeping his wife, who not only likes him working a coaching job, but also likely is pleading with him in private to finally show some willingness to work on his pent-up feelings.
Haven't you ever felt sensitive or emotional about anything?
No.
Come on, Coach.
After blatantly dismissing his sensitive emotions for as long as possible, though, Arnold finally has the breakthrough he's been searching for with Coach Whittenberg all this time. He asks him if there's ever been a time in his life that he remembers crying over anything, and at that, Coach Whittenberg tells a story from his childhood of being at the drive-in movie theater with his parents and little brother, seeing a movie about a little boy and his pet horse, Wayne, that had to go away one day.
When that man rode away on that horse and the little boy ran after them shouting, "Wayne! Wayne! Come back, Wayne!" I mean, I cried.
Now, this right here ends up being kind of a big inciting incident for Coach Whittenberg to open up the emotional dam, so to speak. He realizes that bonding with his brother and crying over this movie was a huge formative memory for him. It opens up the floodgates and leads to him recalling the tears that he shed and the feelings that he felt on the day that his little brother was born. It's kind of like the cork on this bottle of emotions gets popped off and Coach Whittenberg remembers what it's like to have genuine feelings, not the fake ones that you plaster on your face to cover up the real feelings that you're desperately swallowing down. It's him coming to realize that it's okay for him to have feelings and that it doesn't make him weak by default. It makes him human. Sadly, though, this makes me wonder what happened with Coach Whittenberg's brother. I mean, there could honestly be a deeper reason as to why he repressed this memory for so long. It's clear that, at minimum, him and his brother have a distant relationship at this point, and odds are that's something that's affected him deeply, and he hasn't processed it at all. But hopefully he's reaching a point where he's able to do that, given that he's showing some receptiveness to feeling his feelings. At that though, Coach Whittenberg ends up sharing all of these memories with the kids that used to be on his swim team, and they all end up being touched by the story, agreeing to come back to the team and use the song from that film in their performance. Of course, we get a classic training montage of them all practicing their horse lassoing skills and their dancing, and next thing you know, we cut to the day of the big competition. The stands sit full of people all excited for a show. All the while, nearby, Coach Whittenberg's team sits nervous to perform in front of everyone. Eventually, they take to the pool dressed in Speedos and cowboy attire, only to pull off their routine without a hitch, barring Eugene tripping a bit on his final dive. They even end up including that sad, iconic scene from the end of the movie. On the heels of that heartfelt performance, Coach Whittenberg cheers for his team as Tish is left touched and in tears from the story that they told through their synchronized swimming. Or at least that's the impression that we're given. Of course, there's also the chance that she's shedding a thankful tear over the fact that her husband is finally feeling something for once. But who knows? At that, the judges unanimously decide that Coach Whittenberg's team has won the competition by a landslide, and as the episode comes to an end, we cut to a scene that's vaguely familiar to one we saw earlier. Late at night, while all of the kids are at home, Coach Whittenberg and his wife end up enjoying each other's company in the pool.
What do you say we implore the mysteries of the deep?
Jack?
Tish.
Now, this ending is an interesting one. Of course, bearing similarity to the episode where Arnold ends up having the coach run their bowling team. At one point in that episode, we see Coach Whittenberg saying that he went to a burger stand to eat his feelings after Tish kicked him out. Again, like we already spoke on, that established that location as one that's tethered to emotion, right? Then we circle back at the end to the coach and Tish in the parking lot of that same burger stand, sharing a close emotional moment with one another. Now, here we are a few Coach Whittenberg episodes later, and he's grown, albeit slightly. He's learned how to shed some tears, be sensitive, feel emotions, and be a little open about all of it. All of that centered around this pool, which by the end is revealed to also hold some emotional significance in a similar way to the burger stand from before. They end up sharing an emotional moment there together. However, this time it isn't rooted in Coach Whittenberg winning and getting a new coaching gig. It's about him learning some emotional wherewithal and finally feeling some sensitive feelings openly. One thing that's important to keep in mind is how in the episode before this one, we saw the establishment of Tish's tendency to challenge her husband to competitions pertaining to a certain lesson that she wants him to learn instead of actually talking to him about it. This one really is no different. However, this time, instead of a lesson about prioritizing the right things in life and seeing her as important, she wants him to learn a lesson about processing feelings and being sensitive. Hence why she challenges him to a synchronized swimming competition. Like she said herself, an artistic performance like that requires a lot more emotional understanding to really grip the audience and get them to understand the meaning of the performance and to be touched by it. In her challenging him to this kind of competition, she's slyly tricking him into learning some of that emotional intelligence that he ever so stubbornly refuses to pick up on. One other interesting aspect that also leans back to a previous episode is the fact that this one revolved a bit around Coach Whittenberg's issue with crying or feeling sensitive at all. It's just not something that he ever really does. I can't help but think of the episode Best Man, specifically the moment where Tish overhears her husband talking about winning being number one and even air hockey coming before she does. Like we talked about earlier, there are multiple complex reasons why Tish, with tears in her eyes, didn't confront him right then and there. And this is yet another one of those reasons. She would have rather hid those feelings from him instead of confronting the situation head on because she didn't want him to see her crying, because in their house that just isn't something that they do. Or if they do, they only do it in secrecy so nobody knows that they cried. Though that falls directly in line with the repressed emotions in general, it's still a very valid and specific point that pertains directly to that episode. Before this moment where Coach Whittenberg finally lets out all of his feelings for everyone to see, he genuinely seemed like the type to shame crying or showing any emotions at all for that matter, deeming them weak in his eyes. Ultimately, though, this episode showed us truly just how hard one can struggle when they're so shut off emotionally. When they've bottled up feelings for so long and prioritized the wrong things in life to the point where they've pushed away nearly everyone that cared about them. It's one that comes with a deep lesson in vulnerability, and I think one of my favorite parts of this one is that it's really all that it comes with. Previously, a lot of the deep messages in the Coach Whittenberg episodes would get drowned out by the competition between him and his wife. However, in this one, they go out of their way to not even really emphasize the fact that she even has a competing synchronized swimming team, because at this point, it almost doesn't even matter if she does or doesn't. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, she might not have even had a competing team, which that fact alone would make an even bigger point to her challenging him to step up to this. For her, this isn't even about winning. It's about teaching her husband to feel anything for once. Showing him what it feels like to be a normal human with properly functioning emotions. All in all, I might be able to say that this is probably the most frustrating aspect of Coach Whittenberg's character. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that the ending of his saga here seems to portray that he turns a new leaf and is able to show some emotions going forward. However, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't feel like we just watched 3.5 episodes about an idiotic emotional brick wall. Here he is with people around him just begging him to have a little bit of decency, respect, mindfulness, and maybe just a bit of empathy and compassion. All of which are just kind of basic human traits that could describe your average person with decent manners and some emotional wherewithal. However, none of those terms could apply to him, even though he has people like his loving wife just begging him to finally change for once. But for all intensive purposes, this man is the quadriplegic embodiment of you can lead a horse to water repetitively, but you can't make him do rocket appliances. But what do you think, my friend? Did I convince you that Coach Whittenberg is the biggest piece of human scum in Hey Arnold? Let me know down in the comments below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, really quick, I want to give the world's biggest shout out with an extra side of love to my friends in the true 90s kids tier. You all are the greatest, and I appreciate every single one of you. Also, a huge shout out to my friend Pink Floyd Universe in the Sean's Best Friend tier, specifically on YouTube memberships. You are the greatest bestie, and I totally appreciate your contributions to my YouTube journey. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and stick around for another awesome nostalgic walk down memory lane. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. Peace.